I'd say no. The number one dish here in Peru is actually pollo a la brasa, which is similar to American rotisserie chicken, and they serve it with French fries and salad. But the seasoning they put on it and their cooking technique just makes it very, very delicious and memorable. And they also, Peru excels at making mayonnaise too. If you want to have some good mayonnaise, you come to Peru. That's what I think the national dish should be.
Welcome to the Where Have You Been podcast. I'm your host, Bill Ream, and each week on the pod, I have conversations with incredible guests from all walks of life. Expect to hear funny, crazy, emotional, life-changing, and even sometimes life-threatening stories and experiences that will entertain and inspire you. As always, I appreciate your likes, subscriptions, ratings, and reviews wherever you are listening. It doesn't sound like much, but it truly helps the pod get to the ears of more people who may enjoy it. And check out the website, whybpodcast.com, for links to the socials where you can find pictures from the guests and their stories, and also buy merch if you're so inclined. Now let's get to this week's episode. Thank you for being here. We are back for another episode of the Where Have You Been podcast. Welcome in. I'm your host, Bill Ream, always with you, of course. And today I have someone from a background that, or coming from a profession, I guess, that we don't talk about very often. I have someone who I guess, and I'll let you kind of correct me if I'm mispresenting you, John, but I have someone who I guess you would say you're an advisor and an entrepreneur of sorts. I have John on the show today. And John, if you would be so kind as to let the audience know who you are, who are you?
Hi, Bill. Well, thanks for having me today. My name is John Cobb, and I am the founder and chief advisor of Pholus Advisory. And what we do is we specialize in unconventional situations. So I've had many clients over the years. I've traveled extensively also to help these clients. And what we do is we just kind of specialize in unpredictable situations. It's kind of tied into the name of the company, Pholus, which comes from Greek mythology. And for those of you who are not familiar with Greek mythology, Pholus was a centaur who was Hercules' friend. What he did was Hercules was going on the quest to battle the boar. He went and visited Pholus first, and Pholus opened a jar of wine that belonged to all of the other centaurs, and they kind of went crazy, and Hercules ended up killing them all. And that name serves as a reminder as to the power of unintended consequences.
And that's Pholus, correct?
That's right. And our website is Pholus, Pholus.co. So if you're dealing with a situation that's kind of unpredictable, just go ahead and reach out to us, and we might be able to help.
And do you deal specifically with businesses, or would you deal with individuals as well?
Primarily with businesses.
Okay, that makes sense. And then do you have socials that people can catch you on as well, John?
Yes. So my main social is LinkedIn. I believe we can include my personal LinkedIn and the LinkedIn to the Pholus website in the show notes.
Okay, and I'm happy to put that there as well. I'm curious to know, like, how, not that it's a travel story show, but just in the interest of getting to know you a little bit more, how did you get into that? Like, did life present all sorts of different issues to you, and you kind of became an expert at solving the problems and said, hey, I could do this for other people too, or was it something different?
Oh no, exactly like that. Nobody grows up saying, "Oh, I want to be a consultant that specializes in crisis response." That's just not something that people, grow up wanting to do. But I was presented with some challenges throughout my life, and I realized, hey, I might be able to contribute something to businesses and, try to find the best possible outcomes in some difficult situations.
Fantastic. And how long have you been doing that?
I've been doing this, officially under the Pholus brand. I started that this year, but I worked primarily as an independent consultant before that for 7, 8 years.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. And like you said, I'll put everything in the show notes so people know exactly how to get a hold of you and check out your website and such. And so I guess shifting gears a little bit. Well, first of all, you live in the U.S. You are a little further out west than I am, I believe.
Oh no, I actually currently live in Lima, Peru.
Oh, that's right.
I
Okay.
am from
That's right.
Arizona.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're from Arizona. I had Arizona in my mind because we were talking baseball when we met. And so that's right. Speaking of baseball, playoffs are in swing. Are you watching the playoffs?
Yeah, I'll be tuning in for sure. My Diamondbacks were eliminated right towards
Unfortunately.
the last few games of the season, so I'm going to be going for Seattle probably this year because we've got traded them Geno Suarez and they have Josh Naylor, and we've just been good friends for years over the years of playing baseball. But that doesn't transfer over to football because I'm a Cardinals fan and the Seahawks, we don't really like them too much. And that most recent game was a disaster. So
Oh god. Well, and we'll see because this episode probably, I mean, it will definitely air after the playoffs are over. So we'll see how they did when we get to that point. But I digress anyway. So back to travel. So you mentioned that your work, your business, takes you all over the world, literally. But did that was that kind of the first like foray into travel for you, or did it start much younger for you? How did travel become a part of your life?
I was almost born traveling. I was born in December, really close to Christmas, and my parents were living in Texas at the time. And, when I was 3 or 4 days old, they took me on a road trip to go back to Arizona for Christmas. And so my parents would always say, by the time you're 3 days old, you had been to 3 states. So, it's just always been a love of mine.
Nice. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, happy birthday, because this is probably going to release right around your birthday. So that'll be your gift from me. Will be hopefully a fun to listen to episode of the Where Have You Been podcast. So happy birthday.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right, man. So this is the point of the show where I we get into, I guess, the bulk of the episode, and I would ask you, and you can say this however you want. Some people list the places that they've been. Some people like to just start off with a cool story from somewhere that they kind of feel like is like the beginning or something like that. But I'm going to ask you, John Cobb, where have you been?
Oh, I've been a bunch of places. I've been to 47 states, in the United States, and the only states I'm missing are Kentucky, Maine, and Hawaii. So I know the U.S. really well. I've been to a few Canadian provinces. I've been to like 28 of the 32 Mexican states also. And, the way to do that is just doing a lot of road trips. Mexico, the U.S. are great for that because the highways are good and you can just get in a car and go somewhere. So that's a lot of fun. Internationally, as I mentioned, I'm currently living in Peru. Peru, I've traveled pretty decently, and I know the Lima area very well, and I know Cusco, and I've also been out to Ica, and then I've been to a bunch of islands in the Caribbean. I actually learned my Spanish not in Mexico or Peru. I learned that in Nicaragua, and I lived for about a year in India, and I've been to Uganda, Spain, Portugal, and that covers it. My travel philosophy is more about depth of experience versus going to as many places as possible. I really like to get to know the local cultures and, you know, pick up the languages that they speak if I'm there for an extended time and just really, really understand what makes a country and to be able to understand the cultural differences from my own American perspective.
So, well, first of all, let me ask you. So you're in Lima now. I can't remember if you told me. Did work take you there, or was that just a personal decision? Oh,
That was a personal choice. So I like to have businesses where I can be pretty location flexible. And my wife is actually Peruvian, so she's from here, and it just made sense to live here for a while.
and then when you travel, or when you have traveled, it sounds like you don't try to go for like a week or 7 8 days. It. I know you've lived in multiple places for lengths of time, but even if you're just traveling and you're not actually technically going to live in a place, do you try to stay more extended, like a month at a time or more? Sounded like that's what you were saying.
Yeah, I usually like to go for like 2 weeks at least to get the flavor of a place, but sometimes I go for longer stretches. Um, it's just about getting the local flavor and being able to understand the people as much as possible. Plus, I don't really enjoy going back and forth to the airport a bunch of times.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense too. So where was like the first place that you went, like maybe the first time you left the country, let's say? When was that? Where was that?
So I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and there's a place in Mexico called Puerto Peñasco, or in English we call it Rocky Point, and that is in Sonora. And I had remembered that my mom left with my grandparents on a cruise to Europe. So she was out in Germany and in the Baltic states doing the cruise thing, and I was at home with my dad and my sister, and my dad's like, "Hey, let's go to Mexico. It's a new country. You've never been there." And I was like, "Okay." And so we drove down to Mexico in the car, and I remember my first memories of Mexico are getting pulled over by the federales, the Mexican police, and it was like the first time that I saw foreign law enforcement have just a bunch of different weapons and everything. And I remember one guy had a machete and another guy had an assault rifle and everything.
Oh my gosh.
And they pulled my dad over, and he was out there in his broken Spanish, and I remember that him saying, "Yo hablo un pequeño de español," and that just is not proper Spanish. He was saying like tiny versus a little,
Mm-hmm.
but he was translating that literally, and he didn't have to pay a bribe or anything, but they just let him go because they knew that he wasn't going to be much to talk to speaking Spanish. But I'd say that was one of my formative experiences as to like why I wanted to learn Spanish, because having a situation like that and being 5 or 6 years old and just not being able to communicate, it just kind of leaves an impact on you. So I eventually got fluent, and I speak more Spanish at home today with my wife than I do English. So,
Excellent.
that was probably a defining point in my life.
Not that it matters. Side note completely. Does your wife speak English? Or I know obviously Spanish is her primary, but
Yes, yes, she speaks English. She puts in a lot of work with it, but English is just such a hard language.
mm-hmm.
We have like 15 different vowel sounds and a bunch of weird consonant clusters that they don't have in Spanish, and then it's written in different ways than it's spoken. So it's challenging. I'm glad I'm a native English speaker and I don't have to go through the process of learning English as a second
Oh,
language. That's just
no kidding.
really hard.
So do you actually have memories besides getting pulled over? Like, do you really remember that trip? I mean, 5, 6 years old is tough to really have real memories from.
Yeah. Oh, I remember some other stuff. I remember we stopped at our place for breakfast, and it just completely blew my mind that people ate refried beans for breakfast, because that just, in my mind, that was a lunchtime food. But there they were having their beans and eggs, and that was mind blowing for me as a kid. And I remember actually going to the beach too. I mean, there are a lot of rocks. That's why it's called Rocky Point. So yeah, yeah, no, I remember the trip. We only stayed like I'd say 24 or 48 hours at most, because I believe there was like an international payment situation with my dad's card. Like it just wasn't working in Mexico, so
Mm.
we didn't really have much money to spend on accommodations. But I've also dealt with international payment situations like that too, since in the line of my work. So I'm no stranger to cards being blocked for foreign transactions, etc.
So that's when it all started for you. There was something that needed to be solved when you were 5 or 6 years old, and you were like, man, I got to figure out a way to fix problems for people.
Yeah, I'd say that's where it all started.
Whether you realized
Just
it or not.
being a I haven't realized that until now, but it's a good insight. Just that brief little encounter with the Mexican law enforcement and the payment challenges, and I'm like, oh, let's do this for a living. But yeah, defining moment in my life.
We're bringing out revelations here. This is new. Awesome. I think it's incredible that you remember that it had that much of an impact on you at that young of an age to actually have like I don't know if you'd say vivid, but like true, real memories of being in a place. I apparently didn't experience that much at 5 or 6 years old because I really have very little memory of. I think I remember maybe one time being on the playground in like kindergarten, but I we definitely didn't travel when I was a kid very much. Besides maybe a family trip to Disney or something, which I do kind of remember. I guess okay, I'm kind of taking that back because I think I do have some actual memories of when I was that young, but not many, not many. But so is there? So like, if you and I were just sitting here having a beer or a cerveza or a cup of coffee or whatever your drink of choice is, and we were just swapping stories, do you have like a favorite place or memory to start with that just kind of has super impacted your life, or just a fun story to tell anywhere in the world?
Oh yeah. So one experience I think everybody should try to have. Now it's going to be a little bit, I'd say, different, but I really enjoyed eating seafood in Uganda. Now Uganda is a landlocked country, and a lot of people are like, "Well, how are they getting seafood in Uganda?" But it's on the shore of Lake Victoria, which is this huge freshwater lake. Like they have the Great Lake regions in Africa, and I think Lake Victoria is one of the biggest. But in Lake Victoria, they have this huge fish called the Nile perch in English, and in Luganda they call it the imputa. And I probably butchered that with a Spanish accent, but if there's any Ugandan speakers out there, they know what I'm saying. I went out there with some friends of mine, and I ordered this fish, and it was just absolutely delicious. The freshness was unmatched, and the views of the lake at sunset were spectacular. That's one experience I think absolutely everybody should try to have. And Uganda is a very beautiful country, and the people there are super nice and welcoming.
What made you decide to go there, just out of curiosity? Because I don't think for a lot of people that's like a common travel destination. Obviously, people do travel there, but like, what made you decide that that was where you were going?
So, kind of my first foray into entrepreneurship, I had made some friends on the internet who were in the filmmaking business in Uganda. And I had gone out there. I'm like, I should build Netflix for Uganda. So I went out there in terms of that. I was doing some tourist stuff, and that's how I ended up at Gaba, the port on the lake.
That's interesting. Did you have like a was your schooling or your background in like tech type stuff?
No, I self-taught all my tech stuff. My school background is in international relations and diplomacy. I graduated from Seton Hall University. That gave me like the foundation to understand things like getting paperwork done in other countries and evaluating those travel advisors that you see on the State Department's website. And those are there for a reason. But I taught myself the tech stuff because I realized that there's a lot of opportunity out there, and I could save a lot of money in the future too if I was able to handle my own server administration and building websites and stuff.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's nice to have in your back pocket. And you could always kind of do some side hustles, I guess, if you wanted to as well. But
Oh yeah, I've done plenty of those.
nice. I might have to. We might have to talk offline. How long? Do you remember how long you were in Uganda?
I think I was in Uganda for about 3 weeks. Now my dad also traveled out to Uganda with me, but he was there for like I'd say 4 or 5 days, but I stayed by myself a bit longer. This is crazy too. This was during that time when they were all scared about the Ebola virus, and that was out in Liberia. Now most people don't realize that Africa is massive. Like the country of Mozambique, that's the size of from Miami, it'd go all the way up to Hartford, Connecticut in terms of length. So these are big countries. Now, Ebola was out in Liberia, and Uganda is obviously on the other side of the continent. And people back in the States were freaking out. They're like, oh, you're going to get Ebola and you are going to die if you go out there. But I'm like, look, okay, the Ebola virus would be in Vancouver, and Uganda would be in Miami. That's how much of a distance there was between those 2 points. So, it was definitely worth the trip.
Oh, I suppose things could travel, right, from like the way COVID spread. Somebody's traveling from one place to another, but when you're talking that distance, I guess just in the end, it's a good thing you were safe. So it worked out. But
Yeah, I think Ebola is like transmitted through bodily fluids and not respiratory like COVID.
okay,
I'm not a virologist or anything, but it wasn't anything to be worried about. And both my parents are healthcare professionals, so with my dad being a healthcare professional, he made the judgment call. And he's like, "Well, look, it's not going to get spread that far in
excellent.
that short of time."
Well, that's good. And did you end up getting Netflix going?
No, no, that didn't work out because my technical skills weren't there, and I worked with some developers in India, and it just wasn't able to be built. I mean, could I build Netflix for Africa today with my technical skills? Absolutely. I'd be able to do that, but back then I was just too inexperienced, and it just didn't work out. But I view failure as data collection. So I learned a lot and I got a lot of fun stories out of it.
Nice. Any stories or that you'd like to share? I mean, I guess they're not specifically travel stories, but if you have, I mean, I'm good for any stories, to be honest.
Oh, let's see here. Um, More about Uganda. Yes, there was a situation. This is kind of my first international crisis situation I dealt with in Africa. But one of the people I had, hired to help me take me around Uganda, and in this, I remember it was this white Toyota minivan that we drove around everywhere. And he got stopped by the police, and they impounded the vehicle, and they made us go all the way out to the station. And I remember this town was called Mpigi, Mpigi, if you want to Wikipedia that. But they detained the driver, and so my strategy him out of jail there is I just sit out there in front of the jail until they get him released. So I think we're there like 5 or 6 hours, but the police commander got tired of looking at me, and he just let him go.
Wow. Do you have any idea why they detained him?
I think his driving permit wasn't in order. Now, if you're going around a lot of these developing countries in Africa and in Asia, especially, traffic stops are frequent. And, in many cases, they can just find some arbitrary issue with the vehicle or the paperwork. But, they were speaking a local language, so I didn't get the full understanding of the situation. But it's scary, being like the only white person for miles in rural Uganda and not speaking the local language. And Ugandan English is even challenging in its own right.
Sure.
But I was able to resolve that situation fine.
And there's some places, and hopefully not a lot when you're comparing to the grand scheme of things, but there are definitely some places where the law enforcement is corrupt. I mean, it is the way it is, and yeah, like you said, not only maybe finding reasons to pull you over, but then taking bribes to just get you out of a situation, and really you maybe didn't even do anything wrong. I'm not saying that that's the way it is there, but um, certainly there are places like that. I don't know if you've ever encountered that before.
Yeah, I've encountered all sorts of corruption before. I mean, there's generally two flavors of it. I've found that there's corruption where you pay to break the law, and that's like giving like an inspector some money to pass a building code or whatever. And there's also corruption. This is more in Asia. We have less of this here in Americas, but you have to pay people to do their jobs. So, like in Cambodia, I know they call it tea money, and that's just a well-known fact. To get a government official to take action on your file, you're gonna have to slip them a little extra, and then it gets processed that way. In some places, it's so bad that they don't even take any action at all unless you pay them their tea money.
I had a guest on, and I can't remember if it was India, but I think that's what's popping into my head. And they had wanted to have like a big rager birthday party for somebody, and yeah, he had to contact the police chief and bribe him, and he was scared out of his mind because you don't bribe police, but yeah, and he said it worked out. I mean, you might know. I mean, you said you lived in India for a year, right?
Yeah, that's right. No, that's how it works in India. Even for something as simple as like a business registration, you're gonna be having to pay the extra fee. And I know also Mexico, they do require a lot of bribing, but they'll take action for getting your paperwork processed without the bribe. So that's a positive side. But sometimes the bribe is used there to speed things up or get away from a Byzantine legal requirement. Now, I don't ever advise bribing, nor do I pay bribes. So that's something to keep in mind too. And a lot of times, if you're just firm with locals in these sorts of situations that they're not going to get any money out of you, then they'll understand it and they'll back down.
Hmm. Interesting. And you're on the record now, so that's good. And I was going to say something before
Yep.
too, because you were talking about people saying not to go to Uganda. It's not going to be safe. And I know it's a different situation, but a lot of people say, don't go to Mexico. You're going to die. And I think what we find is when you go to the right places and you do the right things, most places are safe.
Yeah, no, it's exactly that. I mean, the thing is, the first thing you have to do is treat everybody with respect, and that goes to in the United States and as well as just internationally. Just don't be a fool. Don't be running your mouth off. Don't be flashing large amounts of cash. Focus on going to areas that look safe. If you kind of have a bad feeling about something, just avoid it and you'll be good. But most places are generally safe to visit. I mean, the U.S. State Department travel advisory system is generally pretty good now, especially that they released the 4-tier system. Because I remember back for a while there was only just like a 3-tier system, but read the travel advisories. That really helps. And my advice also is if something is like a 4 on the list and it says defer non-essential travel, don't go there because it's just not worth it. I've made some mistakes and I've traveled to places that are on the level 4 advisory, and you're just not going to have a good time there. So it's better just to stick to 3 and below.
Can you share anything that happened during those situations? Where did you go and what happened that you kind of wish you hadn't?
So one of those places I had gone to was Chihuahua City in Mexico, and that was back during the Calderon administration when they were cracking down on the cartels and everything. But I decided, hey, I speak Spanish, let's just go for it. And so I went to Chihuahua around Christmas time, I remember, and I was going to go do the Copper Canyon train, and I was there in the city. And I just remember it looking, really worn down, and there were, bars on the windows and stuff. And it was the first time I'd come encounter with an OXXO that didn't let you go in after a certain hour at night. So, I had to order through the little window that they have on the convenience store to get I think I was getting some rancheritos. Those are the ranchero flavored chips that night with an apple soda because you can't really get those that often in the States. But I had to order that through the window, and I'm like, oh, great. What happens if somebody comes to rob me outside of this store? It just wasn't really worth it. You just got to stick to 3 and below. Did I come into any danger? No, because I don't go out to bars or drink or anything when I'm in foreign countries. I try to keep it to a reasonable amount of alcohol. But that night I just stayed in the hotel room. I think it was I packed it in really early, and then the next day we left for the Copper Canyon train. No, completely not worth going to a level 4 travel advisory
So
place.
you actually felt possibly unsafe, even though you ended up being okay, but you kind of had that feeling.
Yeah, no, I definitely had the feeling. It just, you know, you just got to listen to your gut instinct. That's the main secret for staying safe while traveling.
Yeah. Let's take things since we'd mentioned India already. I mean, you had to have some really cool experiences there, living there for as long as you did. And was that just a life choice? Hey, I'm gonna go live in India for a year.
Yeah, I was going there to build African Netflix because I found some developers and everything who said they could help me with that. So I went there to be an on-site customer. But I lived there for about a year. I was primarily in Hyderabad, but I also went to the Araku Valley is absolutely beautiful. That place is amazing. They've got their coffee that they grow out there. I went to Mumbai, Pune, and Bangalore is another wonderful city. Just like a lot of vibrant energy, and that's definitely in my mind, the tech startup capital of India. I didn't go up north to Delhi or anything. I kept it mostly to South India.
And another place that's like super vast, right? I mean, it's it's to me it's sort of like, and I've never been to India. But the place that I compare it to in my mind, because there's so many different areas and places to go besides the US, which we know what the US is like, and there's so many different areas and so many different kind of vibes and feelings and cultures and whatever, even within our own country. But I remind, like, Italy, again, smaller, but there's so many different areas, so many different ecosystems, so many different vibes and feelings all over the country, that it's like you can't just say I'm going to Italy for a week and see even a tenth of what you could see. And I feel like India is probably even more than that. Like, you go to India for a week and you're gonna see like 2% of anything that you could see in India. Am I right in that?
Oh, I'd say less than 2%
Yeah.
because it's such a huge country and it's so diverse. I mean, you have people in far eastern India, and they look more like they're of Chinese descent and everything, and their cuisine is different. And then you go further west, and it changes. And the amount of biodiversity and cultural diversity is just amazing. I think they have like 34 official languages or something, outside of Hindi being their main national local language. Where I was at, they didn't speak much Hindi. It was actually Telugu. And I did take some Telugu lessons, but I forgot all of it.
But while you were there, you could at least hold basic conversations.
Yeah, I mean, it was really hard, right?
Mhm.
And I've studied quite a lot of languages over my life. But it was just the writing system threw me off a bit. I've only studied languages before that are in the Latin script, and also the word order was challenging. And
Mhm.
personally struggle too when languages like have tonality or vowel lengthening.
Oh gosh, yeah, that would be really difficult to me. So tell me, I mean, in all the time that you were there, in the travels that you did do, just exploring in India, any do you have a couple of just stories that stand out to you as really memorable experiences that you can share?
Yeah, I had a connection who got me a behind the scenes tour to the Mysore Palace near Bangalore, and that was just absolutely beautiful. I remember the innate or the really detailed stone carving that they had on the palace, and getting to see some of the art just close up. That really was amazing and breathtaking. That's definitely a must see for anybody. And then I also went to the Golconda in Hyderabad, and that was also that was like an old fort that they built on top of a hill. I'd say it was built around the 1200s or something. I can't remember the exact date, but I did the tour there, and I remember they showed me like the little holes in the gates where they'd pull boiling oil on top of the attackers and everything. And,
Oh my gosh.
we don't have many walled fortresses like that in the United States, so seeing something like that up close and personal is very memorable.
Absolutely. I mean, that sounds incredible. Was there was there I'm kind of bouncing around and I apologize for that. Was there a place in the world that you've been that you just had like a just something was just so beautiful and so moving and like almost like breathtaking, like take your breath away?
Oh, I've seen quite a few places that are breathtaking. One of them in the States is the Grand Canyon because it's just so vast and it's almost like incomprehensibly big, and it helps you, just feel how truly small you are. That's one of the places. I'm biased though because I'm from Arizona. But I also think the archaeological site here in Peru of Ollantaytambo, that was also breathtaking because you're just going in there and you see this big, massive Incan city built on the side of this mountain, and you realize this is where they the Incas had one of the last stands. It was getting towards the end of the collapse after Pizarro came to Peru to conquer the Incas. But you can go inside the room where the last Inca hid out, and I can't remember his exact name, but you can sort of just feel kind of the tension that was happening at that time.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that actually. That's at least a couple times now you've kind of answered a question before I asked it, which I actually appreciate. But I've been to a couple places that have that, you know, that sense of history. And sometimes, sometimes you just go somewhere and you just appreciate the beauty of it or the work that went into building a place or whatever. But I've definitely had moments where you actually feel it. Like you're not trying to or anything. It just happens where you just something comes over you and you just I don't know if it's a spiritual thing or what, but you can just feel something from the place that you're in. And I think it's awesome when that happens because that's something that sticks with me, like, for the rest of my life.
Oh no, exactly. Yeah, there've been other places too that are kind of awe-inspiring like that. Like there was trying to remember the name. It was a place in Mexico. It was Tajín in Veracruz. That was an archaeological site that were built by, I believe they're Nawa speaking people, but they have that special. There's a special pyramid that had like a bunch of archways in it, and they have them on the license plates in Veracruz. But that was another awe-inspiring archaeological site. Now, one for me that was completely underwhelming, and I was expecting it to be good, was Chichen Itza. That definitely. I mean, they consider it one of the new wonders of the world, but there are far superior archaeological sites out there to that one, and it's just too crowded now.
Interesting. Yeah, and that can really hurt things too. I think you had mentioned because we did talk before. I think you said you've been living in Lima, but you have not been to Machu Picchu. Am I correct?
That's correct. So before we moved to Lima, or before my wife moved back to Lima, I'd been to Peru like 5 or 6 times, and I've been living here for about a year and a half now, and I still haven't been to Machu Picchu.
Which I thought was interesting because of the fact that you've been to Cusco multiple times. But I know you said you enjoy Cusco, but it's still, like it's so close and it's like the through way to get there. But that was one of the places that for me, I thought I was going to be disappointed because of the amount of tourists that go there and see it. And yes, we did it over 2 days. So we went afternoon for the first time and kind of did the main levels. And yes, it was very busy. But you're still not like I didn't experience being like right on top of others. So for me, it wasn't terrible. But then we went the next morning, and that's first of all, if you're going to Machu Picchu, anybody do it over 2 days. And I highly recommend doing what we did, which is go midday for the first time, and then go first thing in the morning the second time, and it's amazing the amount of people who don't go first thing in the morning. It was so much more quiet. We actually climbed up the second mountain. I can't think of the name of it. It's not Huayna Picchu. It's a different one. And there was two other people up there, another couple, and just standing up there in the clouds and looking down on Machu Picchu with almost nobody there it's something I'll never forget. Anyways, we're not here for my stories. We're here for your stories. So take us somewhere. Take us. You have a whole another list of more places that you've been. I know sometimes I feel like I'm putting somebody on the spot, but you know the stories and memories that stand out to you that you would tell me if we were just sitting around. Tell me somewhere. Tell me something funny or something I don't know scary that happened to you somewhere.
I'll tell you something that was, perception altering for me.
Okay, excellent.
This, when I was 16, I went with, I guess, an NGO or a nonprofit called Amigos de las Americas. And what they do is they round up a bunch of teenagers and they drop them off in Latin America to do community development. Now, we're not going to be talking about the merits of the program or anything, but that was a program I had participated in. And I remember on that trip, it was also very life changing for me because I began to appreciate the value of human life after that. But while I was there, I remember talking to a guy named Vicente, and this is in a place called Los Santos in Trontales, Nicaragua. And he told me this story about the civil war that they had there back in the 80s. A lot of us American listeners may be familiar with the Iran Contra affair. Vicente was on the Contra side of that, and he had a big scar on his stomach, and he told me that he had gotten hacked with a machete during the Civil War. And during the war, he had to hide out in an oil drum for 3 or 4 days because the Contras were in the area. And while he was hidden in the oil drum, he listened to them execute his sister and his niece. And so, having seeing a guy like that who, I previously saw with a big smile on his face all the time, to share his personal experience of, being in war, that just left a huge imprint on me. And then while I was there, I picked up a couple of, tropical illnesses that really messed me up. And I missed, I'd say, probably 118 days of my junior year in high school. And, I had this intestinal problem called tropical sprue. For medical people out there, they might know that it's a malabsorption that happens in your intestines. And, for several years afterwards, I couldn't properly digest like leafy greens or anything. And then I also had a parasitic worm infection
Oh my gosh.
that was deemed visceral larval migraines. And what that was is like basically I had the heartworms that grow in your dog, but that they entered in my body probably through a cut. I cut myself and I fell into the mud, and I guess the worm eggs got implanted in the cut. And I got back to the States, and it took for them about a month to grow or something, but I started feeling these bugs under my skin, right? And I'm like, I was feeling fatigued all the time because the worms, what they would do is they'd just burrow through your muscles and put holes in them, right? And I just was sleeping for probably 18 hours a day. And I was a young kid, 16 years of age. So, at that age, you have a lot of energy. But I was sleeping 18-hour days. I had personality changes and everything. I was very volatile emotionally, and put my family through a lot. But they stuck with me through it. And I went to this parasitologist, and he gave me these completely ineffective treatments that just made my intestines hurt more. And I lost, quite a bit of hair on my body from it. And they're completely ineffective. But then I actually ended up going to my chiropractor, and he said, "Okay, John, look, you need to drink a cup of white wine every day, and you got to take these chelated zinc pills." Now, at this point, I was suffering for like 7 months, right? But after I go to the chiropractor and I do what he says, the parasitic worm infection went away in 3 days.
Oh my
It was as
gosh.
close to thing as a miracle cure for me. So, between experiencing, so much the aftermath of so much human suffering from those people, later having my own struggle, because there were points where I thought I was going to die,
Oh man.
when you're just not all there and, you're sleeping all the time, you just start to have a new perception on life. But yeah, no, after that happened, yeah, I view things in the world, just differently. It helps me see people as people. And that's what we're missing a lot today in the United States, I feel, with some of the political discord and whatnot. Like a lot of the comments I've seen after the Charlie Kirk assassination, it just, we stop seeing each other as human beings. And, travel is one of those things that helps you appreciate people for who they are and, understand the true meaning of human dignity.
I'm gonna agree with you, but I'm also gonna with a caveat because I still think that there are people who travel who don't get it. I've seen them that are still just kind of there with blinders wherever they go, and it's about them and it's about their whatever they want to see and do, and it doesn't whatever affects other people, it just doesn't matter to them. And I think it's few and far between, but I've definitely seen it. I think it should be exactly what you said, and I think for most of us it is. I know for me it is. I mean, my world expanded when I started traveling, and I didn't start traveling. People know this who've listened to the podcast regularly. I didn't start traveling until outside of the country. until 2016. And so I was already, in my almost 40 years old when I started really traveling. And I'm blessed to have been able to see as much of the world as I have. But, when you go to these places and if you really do like what you do, where you're spending time getting to know the culture, getting to know the people, actually immersing yourself in it, it can be life changing anywhere you go, even if it's not something momentous like what you went through. But first of all, I want to mention before I forget, that sounds horrific, man. Absolutely horrific. I'm glad you
Yeah.
made it. And how? I mean, what made you think to go to a chiropractor when whatever you called him, a parasitiologist, whatever, couldn't figure it out?
So, it was just kind of a Hail Mary. I'd go in periodically for adjustments and everything. And I remember there was a day when I could actually see the worms under my skin. It was on my shoulder blade, and there were two of them. And I had a picture of it, and I just showed him. He's like, "Oh, I know what to do about those because I think he had some relative of his who lived in Oklahoma, and they had that same problem in Oklahoma with the parasites. So he just did what he was told about treating parasites in Oklahoma, and he patched me up.
Incredible. So, so awesome. Definitely never had a story like that on the pod. So that might be our teaser, buddy. That was good. We'll kick off the episode with parasites crawling under your shoulder blade. Let's switch a little bit and go. So I know you said you actually speak Portuguese. So you spent time in Portugal, you spent time in Spain. What made you, well, for, how long were you in Portugal? And is that why you learned Portuguese? Because you were there for such an extended period of time?
No, so I'm still in the process of learning Portuguese, and I wasn't in Portugal for an extended period of time. Actually, I didn't like Portugal very much when I went there, to be quite honest. Because at that point in my life, I was just so focused on Spanish, and I'd already been fluent in Spanish for quite some time. But I had some negative experiences abroad in dealing with Portuguese speakers, and for years, people were like, oh, John just doesn't like the culture. But earlier this year, I started advising a startup in Mozambique called Ideal Technologies. And it's an agri-tech startup. But I was having, a hard time communicating with the founder and his team. So I decided to learn Portuguese. And, through the process of working with the people of Mozambique and speaking them and learning the language, I've just got, I've discovered it's actually an entire completely different world, that's, refreshing and very intellectually stimulating for me. So it's definitely worth studying if you already speak Spanish.
So it was more of a business decision, but you ended up actually enjoy it enough that it makes sense for you to keep learning it. Are you still working on a business out there with them?
Yes, yes. I still converse with them, almost daily, Monday through Friday. Weekends I don't do any business work at all. Monday through Friday, yep. I'm talking to them every day, and they have a lot of potential. And for me, I could have just tried to stick with it through the English, but I've noticed now that we have so much AI these days, it kind of atrophies your brain and your intellectual capabilities. So I've felt actually more energized and engaged with the world now that I studied Portuguese and everything. There's just so many health benefits and emotional benefits that come with learning a new language.
Hmm. Very interesting. I've been trying to push myself to learn Spanish because I find I've like all of the Spanish speaking countries that I've been to, I've really enjoyed, and I've always had to rely on someone else to translate for me, or Google Translate or whatever, or hope that I get lucky and find an English speaker. But I definitely it's on my list, and hearing that, I guess maybe that's something I should really try to really devote myself to a little bit more. Would you be willing at some point to give Portugal as a whole another shot?
Oh, absolutely. Now that I speak the language and I've studied them, there are some monuments in different cities that I'd like to visit now that I've kind of done a deep dive. So, my original focus for learning Portuguese was on Mozambique, but I've also done quite a bit of reading on Portugal and I've really found the whole historical period of decolonization from their perspective just to be completely fascinating.
And it sounds like you really get into like history kind of drives you, history, artifacts, things like that. Is am I right in that? Like when you seek that out when you go to different countries and places?
Yes, yes, that's probably my main driver for visiting things. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who just likes to go flop around by a beach. That's not me. I'm about having the local experience, talking to as many locals as possible, eating the local food, and seeing the local historical sites. I also do enjoy bird watching too, so you'll see me with my eBird checklist out there looking for new birds. And I do appreciate natural beauty as well.
Awesome. Tell me, we didn't touch on Spain, did we? Any time
No,
that
we
you
haven't
spent
touched on
there?
Spain.
Tell me anything about Spain. I've never been. It's definitely on my list. Obviously, it's another very large country, but what was your experience like there?
Oh, I thought Spain was a wonderful country to visit. Um, they were very receptive to me speaking Spanish. Now, a lot of countries, it just depends on the individual culture. Like some of them, if you speak the local language to them, they'll speak back to you in English, and I find that to be kind of annoying because I've put in a lot of effort into learning another language. Now, some people just like want to practice their English because there aren't that many natives walking around. I've embodied the American value of assimilation to the core. So when I go to other countries, I do my best to assimilate there. But they'd talk back to me in Spanish, and it was almost like they were proud on the inside. I felt of having another American like, fluently speaking their language.
Yeah, yeah. And some you said like that they speak to you in English, but maybe that's like being proud of the ability that they have too. Like, so that's cool.
Yeah. Food in Spain was fantastic. I remember buying some olives there. Those are the best olives I've ever had in my life. And also, I'm not too big into seafood, but I do remember these mussels that I ordered from a local restaurant in Cadiz when I went there. That's another beautiful city. Not many people go to it, but it's definitely worth visiting.
What was that place again?
Cadiz,
Yeah,
Cadiz.
yeah. I've heard of it. I don't know exactly where it is, but
It's in Andalusia, so southern Spain. I didn't go up to northern Spain when I was there. I just, we did a road trip through southern Spain and Portugal.
okay. So that was the same trip, which I guess that makes sense too. So excellent. So tell me, probably we're getting close to an hour. Believe it or not, time flies. It's unbelievable. So I would say, if you have a few different places that we haven't talked about, or places that maybe we touched on, but you have some really cool stories or memories that you want to share and make sure we get out there before we get to my final five questions. I'm not rushing anything by any means. So if you have more stories to tell, I'm not going to stop you. But if you have a couple, two, three, whatever more from anywhere in the world, even in the US.
Let's see here. Well, I'll give you one of my cruise hacks. So I'm not big into cruises, and I don't know if I'll ever go on a cruise again because my wife is definitely afraid of them. She's like, yeah, I can't imagine being on a big boat in the water. But when you're visiting islands on the cruises, the best thing you can do is hire a local taxi cab driver and have him drive you around the island and point things out to you. I got to see, for example, in Grenada, we did this where Ronald Reagan sent in the commandos when we invaded Grenada in the 80s, and that was really cool. And most people who go to Grenada just don't go to that field and see like the historical significance of it. So, that's more in line of my philosophy of just trying to squeeze as much cultural value of a place in as short of time as possible. But that was definitely worth it. And if I go on a cruise again, that's going to be something I do. I did that too when I went on the Alaskan cruise. So even if you're going into somewhere in the states, it's completely worth it. I remember up in Alaska, we hired a driver and he drove us all the way up to the Yukon, and I'm like, oh, cool. Now I've been to the Yukon, and that's obviously a famous place in the States. And so very beautiful up there too. Completely worth visiting.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of people when they do the cruises, especially when you're in like the Caribbean, they're going there and they're going to hop onto the beach and sit there for 4 hours or whatever time you have while you're there, and then get back on the boat and go. And you're not seeing the place. I mean, we did one cruise. I think I would do them again. I think they're wonderful. I understand you're a little restricted. You might have to do a guys trip or something, but we with minus one or two places that we stopped, we did try to go inland and see some sights and whatever. Even though you don't get all day most of the time, but we made it a point as well. So I agree with you. Just going to the beach, you can go to a beach anywhere, even if they're beautiful. And because you're in the Caribbean, I can go to beaches in the U.S. Let's do something different and see something that I can't see anywhere. So yeah, I agree.
No, exactly. It's that whole sun and sand model of tourism. It's just so extractive to local economies because they go and they build up the massive resorts and they don't really respect the environment so well, and it doesn't really benefit the local economy very much. So definitely not my thing.
Yeah. So okay, so cruises aside, is there anything else you can think of, or do you want to head into the final five questions? It's up to you completely, my friend.
I'm ready to go for the final five.
Okay. And did you happen to listen to them ahead of time, or are these going to be a surprise for you?
They're going to be mostly surprised. I did have listened to your podcast before, but the final five questions are going to be fresh, so I don't have any prepared answers.
Excellent. Like I said, nothing's tricky here. It's all based on your own experiences, and you'll know the answers. So okay, getting into it, and I tell every guest if this spurs a memory for you and you want to go into some more detail, we love detail. So as much as you can give us, and if you have any stories that jump out at you or that trigger when we're asking these questions, then by all means, please, no time constraints here. So question number one, and I say this every time, but it's new to you, so I phrase this very specifically. Of all of the places in the world that you have been, where was your maybe one or two favorite meal experiences that you've ever had?
Meal experiences. Okay, so I've got a bunch of favorite places to eat around the world, but I'll give a shout out to.
And sometimes it's not necessarily even the meal itself, maybe, or like the food itself. Maybe it's the environment, anything and everything that goes into it. But if it's memorable for you, doesn't matter why. Go for it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just like to clarify.
Oh no, no, I remember, locally in Tucson, where I'm from, there's this breakfast place called Gus Ballone's, and they make the best cinnamon rolls out there. And I'm a huge breakfast fan, so one of my travel evaluation criteria is, do they have good breakfast food, or what's the breakfast going to be like? And Gus Ballone's makes the best cinnamon rolls. So for people who are heading out to Tucson, you should definitely try them out. Now, another memorable food experience, I remember my wife took me to eat pollo la brasa in Peru my first time around my birthday. And a lot of people, say, oh, Peru, ceviche, that's the number one dish. But I'd say no. The number one dish here in Peru is actually pollo la brasa, which is similar to American rotisserie chicken, and they serve it with French fries and salad. But the seasoning they put on it and their cooking technique just makes it very, very delicious and memorable. And they also, Peru excels at making mayonnaise too. If you want to have some good mayonnaise, you come to Peru. That's what I think the national dish should be. But
That's an
yeah,
interesting
those are.
statement.
Yeah, no, people don't really associate like mayonnaise with Peru, but no, I mean, I can't even really eat mayonnaise when I go back to the States because we just don't do it right.
That's really interesting. Awesome. Okay. I don't even know if I had mayonnaise when I was there because I didn't know. I didn't know. Huh. Interesting.
Well, if you come back, I will take you to eat some delicious mayonnaise. I don't make it at home yet. I'm too scared to.
Jeez, try it, man.
No, that's kind of like my culinary Moby Dick. I always am gonna do it, but I never get to it because I have such good mayonnaise here around me.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you don't really need to. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so all right, question number two. And this might be my favorite. Of all the places in the world that you have been, if I was to come to you and say, John, here's a free trip to go back to a place that you've already been, where would you say, no, thank you, I don't want to?
Okay, so this is a tough one, but I have two places. We're gonna do one in the United States and one in internationally. How does that sound?
That's perfect.
All right, so for the United States, I'd say the worst place I've ever been would be Bakersfield, California. Now, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings out there, but I remember when I was a kid, we were doing one of our lengthy road trips, and we get into the hotel, and we were going to go into the hot tub, and we discovered that somebody had done a number two or had a bowel movement in the hot tub at the hotel there, and it was just really gross. But that night also we had eaten at the Sizzlers, and that all made us have the same stomach issues that had happened in the pool, and it just was a terrible experience. And then on top of it, there are far too many Dodgers fans out there. Being a diehard Diamondbacks fan, our arch enemy is the Dodgers, and I just don't want to be around those folks. So no.
Great
Um,
answer.
and then they roll up the
Poor,
sidewalk
poor
super early.
Bakersfield. Poor Bakersfield.
And
Sizzler
then
and the hot tub ruined it for you.
no, and then there was this book that they made us read when I was like in third grade, and the kid was from Bakersfield, and I hated reading the book. I think it was called Dear Mr. Crenshaw or something. And I generally like the books that they made us read in class, but like that book, I completely hated it. So I'm just like, oh, this is a miserable place.
That's like
Now
four
California has
strikes.
a lot of beautiful places, but Bakersfield is not it.
Touche. Okay.
And then for my international destination, this is a this is an oil town in northern Veracruz in Mexico called Poza Rica. Now it was near Tajín that I'd mentioned previously in the podcast, right? But it was just completely run down and disgusting. Like, I don't know if you imagine like a tropical Permian basin. That's what this place was like. Like it was 95% humidity. The sun was beating down at you. It was like 91 degrees outside. So you're just, completely drenched in sweat. And then the town is beat to hell because of the oil workers. And, you have like that oil town smell. And it just definitely not worth visiting. But while I was there, the only redeeming quality was I found a place that, like their top restaurant in the city, they make like American style biscuits. Now, American style biscuits are really hard to find outside of America. These ones were really good. But would I go back to eat those biscuits? No.
That's fair. Now, if they had killer mayonnaise, maybe. I'm being
No,
sarcastic.
Mexican mayonnaise is a lot different from Peruvian or American mayonnaise. They just put like an ungodly amount of lime in it, and on some dishes it's good. Not on uh, it's nothing to write home about.
All right. Noted. Noted. Okay. So question three, we're going to flip that and say, of all the places in the world that you have been, where are the one or two places that you absolutely must get back to?
Okay, so I'd like to go back to Uganda, of course. Uh, I'd like to go there with my wife and son just so they'd have a chance to experience that and maybe see some of my old friends from out that way. That'd just be a lot of fun just to take a tour down memory lane. I'd also like to go back to Nicaragua where my journey to Spanish fluency really began, and I'd like to see how the community has changed. Now, it's not super safe there right now, and Daniel Ortega is really cracking down on foreign visitors, so I'll have to wait to go back there. But no, I'd absolutely like to go back to those two places.
Excellent. Okay. And question number four is a similar vein. Of all the places in the world, not really similar, I guess. Of all the places in the world that you have not been, and I say this every time, and people are sick of hearing me say it, but not. I want to emphasize not bucket list because obviously bucket lists can be very long. But where are the one or two places that if you only had so much time left or whatever, you knew you could only take two more trips or one more trip for the rest of your life? Where is that one or two places you've never been that you absolutely have to get to?
I'd like to go to Mozambique. I haven't been there yet. I've started learning Portuguese for it, but they have some interesting looking food options there. Visually appealing, not really, but I'd like to try them. They say that they're pretty good, and they have just a lot of amazing wildlife out there. I'd like to go there and maybe take some pictures of some elephants or lions or something because I do a little bit of wildlife photography when I travel, and they also do have wonderful beaches and some pretty cool historical sites. I know in Maputo, the capital, they've got like a house that's made out of like these tin bricks or something that is architecturally interesting. And there's also Ilha do Mozambique, which is up in the north, but that was like the old Portuguese colonial administration center. So they've got like their walled fortifications and everything. But yeah, no, I absolutely have to go there. That's probably my top destination. And I have some other ones. I'd like to go to Japan and watch some baseball out there in those stadiums. I did get a chance to go see the 2023 World Baseball Classic final
That's
when the
cool.
U.S. tragically lost. But I got to see, interact with some of the Japanese fans, and they like do this really weird singing thing, like when their batters come up too. So I'd like to see the difference there. I did go to a lot of Mexican baseball when I lived there too. So international baseball is where it's at.
So you got to see Shohei strike out Trout.
Yes, I did.
Ah, it was heartbreaking. I think I was actually in South America at that time. Yeah, I was. I don't remember if I was in Peru, but I was. It was in one leg of that journey when that happened. I remember watching it at a bar. Brutal.
Yeah.
All right, final question. Question number 5 is an easy one because you're going to know the answer. What is on your docket? What do you have planned? Where are you going, if anywhere?
Okay, so this weekend I'm taking a trip to Arequipa in southern Peru. That's the second largest city in Peru, and they've got a volcano out there, and they have this place that's kind of like Petra in Jordan, where they've carved out into the rocks like a city. Or not quite a city, but like some structures like that. It's very similar to Petra, so I'm gonna go out there and see that. And culinary wise, I'm excited to try the rocoto relleno, which is they have this pepper here. I think it's related to the habanero called the rocoto, and usually it's very very spicy, right? But they have a way of preparing it there where they make it less spicy and then they fill it with like meat and cheese and stuff. And I'm interested to try it, particularly because my mom used to make like American style stuffed peppers. I don't know if you've ever had those,
Oh
but
yeah.
they got like the ground beef and rice and the cheese on the top,
Mm-hmm.
and I absolutely hate them. Like they taste musty to me, and they're bland and flavorless.
Sorry, mom.
I'm gonna try it. Oh, my mom is a wonderful cook. That's just not like the thing I don't eat. But I'm gonna try the Peruvian version and see how it goes. I also have like another travel theory here too, about I try foods prepared on different continents or in different countries to see if I like them, and if I don't like them prepared across different cultures, then I just can say that I don't like the food. Now I've found one food actually that falls into that category that I you know do not like at all, and that is lentils. I've had them in the States. I've had them in Mexico. I had them here in Peru. I've had them in India, and every time they've just tasted terrible to me. So I remember in particular there was this one meal in India that I had, and it looked like chili, like American style chili. You got the beans and the ground beef and the tomato sauce and the cheese, and it looked appetizing, and I thought I was gonna get something, flavorful, something like in that area. But I tried this one. And I'm like, oh, this has lentils in it, and so I referred to it as bait and switch chili, and that has got to be the most disappointing thing I've ever tasted because visually it looked good to me, but in practice it was terrible.
Oh, jeez. That's rough, man. That stinks. to have something that you're so excited to have, and wow, what a disappointment. Anything else down the road that you're going, or is that kind of it for now, and then you'll kind of see where life takes you?
Well, in May, I'm going to be going back to Arizona. My sister is getting married,
Mm.
so congratulations to her.
Mm-hmm.
But she's going to have her wedding at the Phoenix Zoo,
Oh,
and there's going to be
cool.
like an animal experience there, and it's going to be exciting for my son. He's 3, so he'll get to have an interaction with a hawk or a snake or something. I don't think she'll pick a snake. She hasn't said what she's going to pick, but be something like that. And then I'll be going probably out to Spain too in the next year or so to visit my sister-in-law. My wife wants to go out there, and I'd like to have another round too.
Oh, absolutely, especially when you have an excuse to do so. So that's awesome, John. This has been great. If anything's spurred into your mind, you're welcome before we wrap things up. If not, I'll just say, do you have any last words? Anything you want to say before we end?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, travel is the best thing that you can do. Maintain an open mind and try to, uh, interact with the locals as much as possible and be respectful. And, what you get from traveling is what you put into it. So, if you're going to be going with an open mind, you're going to be getting a lot of amazing experiences. And the main thing is to just go somewhere.
Yeah, well said. And honestly, if I have any loyal listeners who have made it through to the end of multiple episodes, it's a recurring theme over and over and over again. So if you aren't traveling already and you start to do it, please heed what we're saying, because I think most of my guests have said the same thing, and it's absolutely true. John, best of luck to you in everything that you have going on. And again, I'll put everything in the show notes where people can find you. If you have a business and you're having some sort of conflicts or something, look them up. Yeah, hopefully we'll keep in touch, and maybe sometime down the road when you've done some more travels and have some new stories and experiences, maybe we'll do it again.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me, Bill. It's been a blast.
Awesome. I'm glad you've enjoyed it, and I agree. I think it was a lot of fun. And yeah, just take care of yourself, my friend.
You do the same. Take care.
And there's another episode of the Where Have You Been podcast in the books. Thank you so much for listening today. It was another great guest with some great stories, as always, and I hope that you will support all of the guests by checking out the show notes and going to their web pages, seeing any socials and projects that they may have going on. And please, again, I'll ask as always to like, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really does help to allow the podcast to grow and reach more people, and I appreciate you for doing that. Also, if you haven't done so, check out the website, whybpodcast.com, where you can find blog posts. If you'd like to be a guest, please register to be a guest on the site. And check out the merch page. There's some really cool stuff if you're interested in representing the pod, along with some other cool travel items and apparel that I'm working on every day as well. Join me again next week for another great guest with more incredible stories. New episodes drop every Sunday just after midnight Eastern Time. Until then, thank you for being here, and have a great day.